Thank you to Jeevey and ETL Motorsports for loaning me this car and letting me test it out and make this video. What's up, fellow drivers? Today I'm reviewing an MR2 with a V6 2GR swap. If you want to know about the MR2 in general, I already did a review of the MR2 Turbo, so link in the doodly-doo below to that video. For this video, I'm going to be focusing on all things about the 2GR and this car specifically. Let's go. All right, so this thing launches hard. It has the 2GR, as I said, making 260 something horsepower and about 245 pound-feet of torque. That is the ECU from the RAV4. It's actually a Camry block, I'm told, and then has the ECU for the RAV4. Now, a lot of people who have the 2GR swap will claim like 290, 300 horsepower, something like that. That is possible, but that is not just a straight stock swap. Now, likely this is making a little bit more in the MR2, particularly to the wheels, because when it was in the RAV4, there's probably a lot more drivetrain loss, and we're getting a lot more going straight to the ground here in the MR2. But the low-end torque is really impressive in this car, and just the immediacy of this, the car feels very eager. So other than the 2GR swap, this has a lightweight flywheel, and it has an upgraded clutch and an LSD. And I don't know exactly what kind of LSD it has, but it feels pretty aggressive. The clutch also isn't like super aggressive, but with the lightweight flywheel, it feels like it's pretty grabby. And it can be tricky if you're not used to it. It took me a while to get used to it. And I think most of it is actually due to the throttle, not the clutch. And the reason why that is because the MR2 normally has a mechanical gas pedal, and the 2GR uses an electronic one normally. So you have to kind of like adapt that. And so it doesn't feel linear like a normal MR2 throttle pedal. And it can be very sensitive feeling. So even like the slightest tap, if you have the clutch in, really revs it way up. And I remember I actually saw another review of a 2GR MR2. It was with Russ's on the Smoking Tire. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. But he mentioned that it was hard to rev match because the moment he tried to blip the throttle, the revs would just shoot way up. And he said it was probably because of the lightweight flywheel, but driving this now, I think it's more than that. Yes, it does have a lightweight flywheel, so it will rev up quickly, but I think it's because of the really sensitive, hard to modulate throttle pedal that's really causing that. So this car is quick. That should probably go without saying, but I'm saying it. And not just here in the canyons, which it does feel very quick here in the canyons, but it feels fast on the freeway too. I easily gapped a Civic Type R, one of the brand new ones. I think he got a little salty about it. I slowly pulled on an Evo 9. I don't know exactly what he had under the hood, but he was pretty fast, and I was just kind of able to pull ahead a little bit. Now, even though it is pretty fast, the power is mostly down at the bottom. Like I said, it feels very eager. It has that initial response, a lot of torque, and there's a slow car in front of me. But it feels like it kind of dies off up at the top. And I think that might be for two reasons. One, it has the factory 87 octane tune. And the other being, I feel like the gear ratios don't quite match up with what the engine really wants. So you get that really immediate punch, and then as the revs climb, it just feels like it kind of dies off a little bit. And in the turbo, it feels like it just keeps pulling. Like you have a lot more boost all the way through. That was a GTR. Okay, so what else about this car? This is obviously unique to this particular car, not necessarily to anybody else's 2GR swap. But other than the mods that I mentioned, this is basically a stock car, and this is a 91 Turbo. So what does that mean? It means it has 14-inch wheels, and the steering is not great feeling. Like, it's very loose. I feel like I'm not really getting much information, and I think that's a combination of the fact that you have the really high profile tires on the 14-inch wheels, as well as the stock bushings, which I'm told are in good condition, but the stock bushings still, I think, just aren't giving me a whole lot of information. It has power steering, but like on my car, I have power steering too, but I have 17-inch wheels and I have the poly bushings, and I feel like I have a lot of precision in the steering and a lot of information coming through the wheel that I don't in this car. So with that sort of vague steering feeling, it makes it a little sketchy at really high speed. So I've had this car a little over 100 miles an hour, and I would say honestly anything over 80 isn't terrifying, but let's just say it doesn't feel safe. And before anybody says anything, yes, the alignment is good on this car. It's just not a great setup, I feel, for really high highway speed. All right, what else? The brakes. So we're on stock turbo brakes, with the exception of having some drilled and slotted rotors, which honestly probably do nothing. If anything, maybe we're getting slightly decreased braking performance because there's less surface area. And I wish there were more brakes. The brakes are okay. You know, the turbo brakes are decent, but with this much power, I would definitely like to have some better brakes. At the very least, maybe some more grippy pads. And I think if we were really on repeated track use, we would want a big brake upgrade. So another thing that's not quite stock about this car is the suspension. It's on Koni yellows and Ibrock Pro lowering springs. I have Koni yellows in my car, and I think they're really good shocks, and I pair them with the TRD. So how do those compare? I would say the TRD, from my experience, is vastly superior to these Ibrock Pro springs. The suspension feels pretty sloshy. I mean, if you're just going for like a slightly improved look, you know, you don't want that 4x4 kind of look, and we caught up to another car, then, you know, they're fine. But I would say if you really want improved handling for more aggressive cornering, they're pretty soft feeling. I'm not a big fan of this suspension setup. Now, all that being said, it's still an MR2, right? So it feels pretty good overall. I'm just saying, in comparison, as far as things you can do with the MR2, I would upgrade the brakes more. I'd do a different suspension setup with maybe the TRD springs or a good set of coilovers. And the throttle pedal just feels a little weird. I think that could maybe be improved. And it has a lot of torque at the low end and dies off a little bit at the top. So those are kind of like your big headlines, I guess. So let's talk about some other little things about the car. AC works. It's blowing cold on me right now, which is pretty cool because you can't use the factory AC, of course, with the 2GR swap, but that's working in this car. The boost gauge is not working, obviously, because this is an NA engine. It's funny though, because it's just pegged at like maximum boost all the time, so that kind of makes me laugh. If you do a 2GR swap yourself, you might want to change that to something like a oil temp gauge or something like that. What else? I think the tachometer is not quite accurate. I want to say it's always running maybe like 1,000 RPM too high compared to what it's really running. And I'm told that this actually needs a different adapter or whatever. Honestly, I don't know the technical aspects of how you make those things functional, but I'm told that it's soon to get a different one that'll make it read more accurately. Another cool thing is that this actually still has a cat. So you could theoretically get this barred, I believe. This one isn't even registered in California, so it's not really a big concern. But it does have the cat, which is pretty cool that it can have that. Of course, a lot of people will choose to just go with a downpipe, and you'll likely get a little bit more power out of it. So how about maintenance on the car? I'm told that you don't have to pull the engine for any belts. The 2GR uses a timing chain anyway, so if you did need to do something with that, you would have to pull it for that. But for any of the other belts, engine can stay in. You can leave it in for spark plugs, oil changes, all that kind of standard stuff. So it is kind of a tight fit, but once it's in there, there's not really a whole lot of monkeying around that you have to do, and it looks like a mostly factory fit. I mean, I've shown a lot of people what's under the trunk, and they're like, dude, it looks factory. I mean, there's a couple things like fuel lines and fuel pressure regulator that are obviously aftermarket, but as far as how the motor sits in there, it looks really good. So let's talk about weight. That's something that some people might be concerned with doing a V6 swap. And that is something that you should be concerned about if you do a 1MZ, which is kind of an old school V6 swap that people used to do, which personally I'm not a fan of. I don't see the point. You get a really marginal power increase, and it's a big, heavy engine. With the 2GR, however, it is an aluminum block. So despite being a large 3.5 liter V6 engine, it's actually slightly lighter than the 3S GTE. As far as driving, by the seat of my pants, I can't really tell a big difference in weight. It feels very similar. So I would say, on paper, you're getting a slight advantage, and I can tell, that it basically feels the same to me. Yeah, it's got that torque, pulls up the hill, but it just kind of tapers off. That was a McLaren. Dude, the cars are out in force today. I mean, it feels very rev happy. So this car is a great example of the kind of classic hot rod formula of like small car, big engine. And it feels like it. Like it feels like I have this beast inside this car, but the rest of the car isn't quite up to speed. So this is a good example of supporting mods being really important. We are running stock brakes. Suspension is like technically upgraded, but I don't think quite up there. Bushings and steering, I don't think are really matching the power. And so overall, the car gives me a slight uneasy feeling under really aggressive driving. But these are definitely things that aren't inherent to doing a 2GR swap. You could upgrade the other things and it would probably feel a lot better. So I've been driving this car around for several weeks and I've put quite a few miles on it. I've driven it on the freeway, just cruising. I've driven it to work in heavy traffic, stop and go kind of thing. I've driven it up the mountain and through the canyons like now. I've even driven it in the rain several times. So I feel like I have a pretty comprehensive picture of what this car is like. Now, speaking of rain, I would say that's actually something that was a high point for this car. Everyone's kind of scared to drive the MR2 in the rain. I don't understand that at all. I drive my car in the rain all the time. And this car actually feels better in the rain, I would say, due to the fact that it has less aggressive tires. So they're more all season-ish. I think technically they are like a summer sport tire, but not as aggressive that I have. And it's a narrower tire and higher profile. And so I feel like I actually have more grip in the rain than I do with my car. In stop and go, it's a pain in the ass. With the LSD trying to lock up and the lightweight flywheel and the touchy throttle pedal, it's not great to drive in traffic. Certainly I have quite a bit and I managed, but if you want this for your daily driver, I would not recommend this setup. At really high freeway speeds, it still pulls hard, but like I said, I think it needs some supporting mods, like the brakes and steering, to make it feel, a little more confidence inspiring. And here in the canyons, it feels good, okay? So despite the criticism that I've given the steering and the fact that it really is using the old school wheels and it could be a lot sharper feeling and have more grip. Overall, it feels pretty good. The car feels well balanced still, and I feel like, you know, once it loads up, it can hold itself well in the turns. I feel like I can accelerate well, and just that eager feeling of the 2GR feels like I can punch it at any point and I'll power out whenever I need to. So I can definitely see the appeal of this. You know, right out of the box, you're making probably slightly more power than the Gen 4 3S GTE. You have that eager, immediate torque down at the bottom, and it does taper off a little bit up at the top, but overall, it still feels like the car pulls really hard. With that in mind, I would say its potential is more limited, okay? So I personally, and this is kind of a preference thing, I really like the feeling of the Gen 4 3S GTE better, and I think just in general, the 3S GTE has a lot more potential. Obviously, if you're going from a 5S FE, this is like a quantum leap into the future. And even if you have a stock Gen 2 3S GTE, or even a slightly tuned one, I would say this is going to be a big improvement. All right, I'd like to thank ETL Motorsports once again for loaning me this car. It's been badass and a ton of fun. Let me know if you guys have any questions or wonder about anything that I didn't cover in this video. Please leave me a comment below. Hit me a like if you like this video. Consider giving me a sub if you'd like to see more reviews and more MR2 content. I've also got a GTR. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you guys later.